My name's Richard Bennett, 55 years old, born and raised in Texas, Maunan, a man who once believed that hard work and loyalty could build anything. Even love. Turns out I was dead wrong. People always say time heals everything, but they never tell you about the years in between, those long, silent nights where the only thing louder than your thoughts is your regret. I still remember that day as if someone carved it into my soul. It was a humid afternoon, one of those sticky Austin days where the air feels heavy enough to break your back. I was standing in the parking lot of my old motel, the Hillview Inn, watching cars roll by, when I saw her. Laura. My wife. The woman I thought I'd grow old with. She was sitting in the passenger seat of a shiny silver Mercedes-Benz, her sunglasses perched on that perfect nose, her laughter echoing through the open window like a ghost of what used to be my happiness. Next to her was a man I'd only ever seen in magazines, David Langford, the millionaire real estate hotshot everyone in Texas seemed to admire. I remember the way his hand rested casually on the steering wheel, confident, polished, entitled. And then there was Laura, looking at him the way she once looked at me. It wasn't the car that hurt me. It wasn't even the man. It was that laugh, that light, careless laugh I hadn't heard in months. The one I used to wake up to every morning, that moment. Something inside me cracked. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just stood there, my heart turning colder with each second that passed. That's when I learned the hardest truth a man can face. Sometimes, love doesn't end with a fight. Sometimes it ends in silence. Back then, I was nothing but a small-town motel manager, the kind of guy who worked 16-hour days and still came home smelling like cleaning detergent. I didn't have luxury watches or shiny cars. I didn't wear tailored suits or dine at rooftop restaurants, but what I did have was dreams. Dreams of growing that tiny motel into something bigger. Maybe one day owning a chain of hotels, having my name on the front doors, creating something that would outlive me. And through every struggle, every late bill, every night spent fixing busted pipes with my bare hands, I thought Laura was part of those dreams. She wasn't. Turns out she wanted something faster, shinier, easier, and David Langford offered her just that. Money, fame, comfort, and the kind of attention that comes wrapped in expensive cologne and promises. The day she left, she didn't even leave a note. Just took her clothes, her jewelry, and the last piece of my piece for months. I kept replaying it all, every memory, every smile, every time she said, "You and me against the world." Richie. Turns out she didn't mean the world. She meant until someone richer showed up, I won't lie. Losing her almost destroyed me. But the thing about being destroyed is, it clears the ground. And sometimes that's where new things start to grow, because 3 years later, just when I thought life had moved on, when I thought I'd buried every memory of her, fate decided to drag me back into that same storm. Only this time, the wind was blowing in my direction. It happened on a cold Tuesday morning. I remember it vividly. Gray skies, light drizzle, the kind of day that makes the city look tired. I was doing my usual walk-through at Bennett Grand Hotel, my latest property. It was my pride. Marble floors, gold-trimmed elevators, the smell of fresh linen and brewed coffee filling the air. I was inspecting the lobby when I noticed a new staff member by the reception desk. She was wiping down the glass counter, moving carefully, nervously, like someone trying not to be seen. There was something strangely familiar about her. The curve of her shoulders, the way her hands trembled when she placed the cloth down and then she turned. My heart stopped. It was her, Laura, the same woman who once left me for a rich man. Now standing in front of me wearing a maid's uniform, the name tag pinned to her chest read L. Langford. Her face, once perfectly made up, glowing with vanity, now looked pale, worn out. Her eyes, those same green eyes that once sparkled with confidence, now carried a quiet shame. She froze when she saw me. The color drained from her face. For a split second, it felt like time folded in on itself. All those old memories, our wedding, our motel, the nights we dreamed of a better life, flashed behind her eyes. I didn't say a word. Neither did she. Finally, she whispered, "Mr. Bennett." I smiled, cold, calm, collected. "Good morning, Miss Langford," I said softly. "Welcome to work." Her lips parted as if to say something, maybe to apologize, maybe to explain. But no words came out. She just stood there trembling, clutching that cleaning rag like it was her last piece of dignity. And in that moment, every ounce of pain, betrayal, and heartbreak I'd carried for years turned into one clear, burning thought. Life always finds its balance. She once looked down on me for being a simple hotel man. Now she was the one wearing the uniform, wiping down my counters. I didn't need revenge that day. I didn't need anger. All I needed was that moment. Because sometimes justice doesn't come through violence or rage. Sometimes it comes quietly, wrapped in irony, served cold by time itself. And that's where my story truly began. You know, people like to believe success starts with luck or talent or some big opportunity. But for men like me, it starts with a mop, a wrench, and a promise to yourself that you won't die ordinary. I wasn't born rich. Not even close. I grew up in a dusty little town in central Texas, where summers could melt the soles off your boots and winters bit harder than heartbreak. My old man, Frank Bennett, worked as a janitor at a rundown roadside motel, one of those places that smelled like bleach and regret. He wasn't an educated man, but he had wisdom carved into his calloused hands. He used to tell me, "Son, don't ever be ashamed to clean floors. Be ashamed if you quit too early." That stuck with me my whole life. We didn't have much. Some nights dinner was just canned beans and a prayer, but my father never complained. He had pride not in what he owned, but in how he lived. He believed that work, real, honest work, could make a man's life mean something. And that belief, it shaped me. When I was 16, my dad passed away. Heart failure. He died at the same motel he worked in for 30 years, mop in hand, bucket by his side. I remember staring at that bucket for a long time. That's when I decided I wasn't going to let his life mean nothing. So I worked. I took any job that would pay, pumping gas, fixing tires, sweeping warehouses, even laying down roofing in 100-degree heat. I saved every dollar I could. By 29, I had enough to rent a few rooms and buy a small 2-story building off Interstate 35. It wasn't glamorous. The sign flickered half the time and the walls still smelled like cigarette smoke from the last owner. But to me, it was everything. That place was my dream, my first motel, the Hillview Inn. Those early days were rough. I didn't have a staff. Couldn't afford one. I was the owner, the manager, the plumber, and the janitor all rolled into one. There were days I'd wake up at 5 a.m., brew the coffee for guests, clean the lobby, fix a clogged toilet in room 7, and then stay up till midnight balancing books that never quite balanced. I used to joke with myself, "You're the boss, Rich, congratulations. Too bad your only employee is also you." But despite the exhaustion, I loved it. That motel wasn't just a building. It was proof that hard work meant something. Every clean towel, every happy guest, every small profit, and it was all mine. I took pride in greeting every traveler who walked through that door. Families, truck drivers, couples running from somewhere or running to something. They all passed through. Each of them had a story, and I had the front row seat to 100 little human dramas. And then, one stormy afternoon, she walked in. It was raining hard that day, one of those Texas storms that make the sky look bruised and angry. The kind that makes you wonder if the heavens are mad at someone in particular. I was behind the counter fixing a broken pen, when the glass door swung open and a woman stepped in, drenched, shivering, clutching a handbag like it was her only lifeline. She looked like she came from another world. Her clothes were expensive, her perfume faint but unforgettable, and her voice, soft, calm, almost musical. "Hi," she said, brushing rain from her hair. "My car broke down about a mile back. Can I use your phone?" That's when I met Laura. I handed her a towel and said, "Phone's right there, ma'am. You're lucky you found us, and we're the last stop before 20 miles of nothing." She laughed, and it wasn't a fake laugh either. It was warm, real, the kind that makes you forget you smell like bleach and motor oil. I still remember that laugh. She called a tow truck, but the rain kept coming. It was getting dark, so I offered her a room. "Don't worry about the charge," I said. "You can settle up tomorrow." She smiled, and that smile, it felt like sunlight breaking through the storm. That night, she stayed. We talked in the lobby over instant coffee. She told me she'd just moved to Austin a few months back, trying to start fresh after losing her job. I told her about my little motel, my late father, and my crazy dream to one day open more of these places across Texas. "Do you ever rest?" she asked with a teasing smile. I chuckled. "When I'm dead, maybe." She laughed again. "You're something else, Mr. Bennett. I didn't know it then. But that was the start of something that would define the next decade of my life." When the rain finally stopped, she said she'd stay one more night just to rest. Then another. And another. Pretty soon she was helping me behind the counter, greeting guests, managing the books, even suggesting little touches to make the rooms more welcoming. It felt natural, effortless, like she belonged there all along. Within months, we were inseparable. Laura had this energy, confident, polished, a mix of charm and grace that made guests love her instantly. She'd decorate the rooms with small flower vases, paint faded walls herself, and even bake cookies for the front desk during holidays. For the first time in my life, the motel didn't just feel like a business, and it felt like a home, our home. We'd sit on the steps outside at night, watching headlights streak down the highway. I'd tell her my dreams of opening a chain of hotels one day, of building something that would carry my father's name, something better than that rusty old mop he left behind. She'd lean her head on my shoulder and whisper, "You will, Richie. You're not like other men. You build things that last," and I believed her. God help me, I did. For years, she was my partner. In business, in life, in everything. We celebrated our small victories together. Our first online booking, our first 5-star review, our first profitable month. I remember how she'd dance barefoot in the lobby when things went well, laughing like a child. We got married a year later. Simple ceremony, just us, a few friends, and a preacher who charged $50 and a handshake. And for a while, it was perfect. I'd wake up to the sound of her humming in the kitchen, making breakfast while the sun rose through the blinds. We'd spend our days running the motel, fixing things, talking about expanding, dreaming about the future. Back then, I truly thought life couldn't get any better. I was wrong. Because beneath all that warmth, the smiles, the dreams, the plans, but there were cracks. Tiny ones at first, like hairlines on glass, but they were there. I just refused to see them. That was the man I used to be. Honest, hopeful, blind. A man who thought love was enough to hold a person close. But life was about to show me that sometimes, love isn't a chain, it's a test, and not everyone passes it. For the longest time, Laura and I were like two hands working the same wheel. We built everything together. The Hillview Inn was our dream. Our baby, our empire in miniature. At first, it felt like nothing could touch us. She helped with bookings, spoke to guests like she'd known them for years, and always had this effortless charm that made people return. She even came up with clever little ideas, complimentary breakfast baskets, travel site partnerships, loyalty discounts, things I would have never thought of. She was my partner, not just in love but in vision, and for a few years it was perfect. Profitable too. That first motel began doing well enough that I started planning for expansion. I bought another property, a small, worn-down roadside inn about 2 towns over. That's when things started changing. It happened subtly, almost like a slow leak you don't notice until the floor caves in. Laura began dressing differently. At first, it was just a new dress or pair of heels. I didn't think much of it. I was happy we could finally afford nice things. But soon, it was every day. Her wardrobe shifted from simple cotton shirts and denim to designer fabrics, bold colors, gold jewelry that shimmered under the lobby lights. She began spending more time getting ready in the mornings. Sometimes I'd wake up and she'd already be in front of the mirror applying makeup. Not for the guests, not for me, but for someone else. It wasn't the clothes themselves that bothered me. It was what they represented. The motel life and our simple, honest grind started to bore her. She used to take pride in clean rooms and reading the kind reviews online, in sharing late-night coffee with me while counting the week's earnings. Now, her eyes lit up when she scrolled through real estate listings and luxury brands. I'd walk into the office sometimes and see her hunched over the computer, eyes shining at images of marble kitchens, waterfront villas, and designer handbags. When I'd ask, "What's that you're looking at?" she'd just smile faintly. "Oh, nothing, Richie. Just seeing what's out there." Those words haunted me later, just seeing what's out there. One night I came home after a long day fixing pipes at the new property. My hands were covered in grease, my back was sore, but I was proud. We'd just finished refurbishing 2 rooms under budget. She was sitting on the porch, legs crossed, phone glowing in her hand. "Hey," I said, trying to sound light. "You've been out here a while. Who are you texting?" She didn't even look up. "Oh, just business," she said with that small detached smile, the kind that feels more like a wall than a welcome. "Business," I repeated. "What kind of business?" She shrugged, still scrolling. "Potential clients. You said you wanted to expand, right?" "I'm networking." I chuckled softly, though something in my gut twisted. "You're starting to sound like one of those city folks." She looked up for a second, her tone flat. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. That moment hung in the air like smoke. I didn't realize it then, but that was the first time I saw distance in her eyes, the kind that no roadmap could close. Weeks turned into months, and she became harder to reach emotionally, physically, even spiritually. At the motel, she was less involved. She used to check in guests, manage the books, chat with the cleaners. Now she was too busy. When I'd ask where she was heading, she'd say things like, "Meeting a potential investor," "Lunch," with a friend who might help with marketing, a short trip to Austin, for business. That word started to poison everything between us. Business. It became her excuse, her armor, her alibi. It replaced us. She stopped laughing with me. She stopped staying up late to dream about the future. She'd go out dressed up, come home late smelling of expensive perfume I didn't buy, and whenever I'd ask, gently, calmly, and where she'd been, she'd always answer with the same line, "You wouldn't understand, Richie. You're happy with simple things. Simple things." That's what she called our life, the one we built together. I started noticing little details. She stopped wearing her wedding ring at times, said it didn't match her outfit. She kept her phone close, locked with a passcode, and she began spending weekends away, claiming she was helping a new client with property staging. The first time she mentioned his name, it barely registered. "David Langford," she said casually one morning while pouring coffee. "He's a real estate developer. Has connections in Austin. Big money." I didn't think much of it. I trusted her. I wanted to trust her, but something in my gut kept nagging. Late one night, she was in the living room, phone pressed to her ear, whispering softly. When I walked in, she immediately turned her back to me. I caught just a few words. Project. Investment. He likes my ideas. When I asked who it was, she hesitated before saying, "It's business, Richie. Go to bed." That was the moment I realized business had a new meaning, one that didn't include me. The changes didn't stop there. She stopped coming to the motel altogether. Said she was consulting now, whatever that meant. I'd wake up to an empty bed, find her gone for days, and when she returned, her clothes carried the faint scent of luxury hotel lobbies and cologne that wasn't mine. When I tried to talk about it, she'd brush me off. "You're overthinking," she'd say. "You're just tired," but I wasn't tired. I was terrified. Terrified of losing her. Terrified of facing the truth that I was already losing her piece by piece. Our conversations became short. Our dinners silent. Our laughter extinct. One night I came home early from the motel, hoping maybe we could fix things, cook dinner together, talk like we used to. But when I opened the door, she wasn't there. The lights were off. Her purse was gone. The closet door was half open, and her side of it empty, all her clothes. Her shoes, her jewelry, gone. No note, no message, no trace, just silence. I checked my phone again and again, waiting for a text that never came. I called her, number disconnected. I drove around town like a madman, checking restaurants, motels, anywhere she might have gone. Nothing. It was like she'd been erased from my life, as if someone had gone through my memories with a blade, cutting her out of every scene. That night, I sat in our living room until sunrise, staring at her empty chair. The coffee pot was still half full from the morning before, the steam long gone. The faint imprint of her perfume still lingered in the air, cruelly familiar. And I remember thinking, this must be what death feels like. Not the physical kind. The emotional one. The kind where someone walks out of your world and the silence they leave behind echoes louder than their voice ever did. I tried to tell myself she'd come back, that this was just a phase, that she needed space, but deep down, I knew Laura wasn't coming back because she hadn't left to find herself. She'd left to find someone richer, and I was about to find out just how rich and just how cruel that man really was. For months, I lived like a ghost inside my own life. Every morning, I woke up expecting to hear her humming in the kitchen, smell her coffee, see her handwriting on the notepad that used to sit beside the register. Buy milk. Call plumber. Love you. But that pad stayed blank. The silence in our home grew louder than any storm. At first, I lied to myself, told myself maybe she needed space. Maybe she was sorting things out. Maybe she'd call. Maybe she'd walk back through that door and say she'd made a mistake. I held on to that fantasy with bleeding fingers. I'd catch myself looking out the window at passing cars, imagining one of them slowing down, headlights glinting, her silhouette stepping out, but she never did. Days turned into weeks. Weeks became months. And every night I'd sit alone in that same old lobby chair, the one she'd picked out from a yard sale, saying it had character. Now it just had dust. The motel still ran, but I was only half there. Guests came and went. I checked them in, smiled, gave them keys, but I wasn't living. I was just existing until one morning. Everything changed. It was a humid Thursday, late summer. I remember because the air was thick enough to taste. I'd just finished unclogging a drain when I stopped by the local diner for lunch. That's when I saw it, right there on the magazine, rack beside the register, Hill County Business. Monthly, glossy cover, bright lights, and smiles that didn't belong in my world. At first, I didn't look too closely. I was reaching for a coffee when a familiar shape caught my eye, her eyes, her smile, and then I saw it. David Langford and his new wife, Laura Bennett Langford, celebrate success at charity gala. My coffee cup froze midair. My heart stopped. There she was, Laura, standing beside David Langford, the man she'd called a business client. Her hand rested on his chest. She was wearing a diamond necklace that shimmered like a crown under the flashbulbs. Her smile, that perfect, polished smile, the same one that used to be mine. My knees felt weak, my vision blurred. For a moment the world just tilted. The diner sounds faded. The chatter, the clinking plates, even the jukebox, and gone. All I could hear was the deafening pulse in my ears. I stumbled outside, still holding the magazine. Rain had started to fall. Light, misty at first, then heavier. I stood there on the curb, staring at that cover like it was some kind of cruel joke. And then I dropped it. The magazine fell into a puddle. Her face, the face I once kissed goodnight, blurred and dissolved beneath the rainwater, ink bleeding like my heart. That was the moment I truly lost her. Not when she left the house. Not when she stopped answering calls. But right there, seeing her smiling next to him, proud, happy. My Laura, my everything. Now wearing his last name like it had always belonged to her. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the motel lobby, staring at the slow spin of the ceiling fan. The neon vacancy sign outside flickered against the window, painting red light across the wall, like a heartbeat fading in and out. Every creak of the floor, every tick of the clock, it all sounded hollow. I remember pouring myself a cup of cold coffee that had been sitting for hours. I didn't drink it, just held it. The warmth had died just like everything else, and then something inside me cracked. Not anger, not yet, just emptiness. A kind of still, heavy emptiness that sits deep in your chest and eats away at whatever's left of your soul. I didn't shout. I didn't break things. I just sat there for hours, watching the same fan spin, listening to the rain. By morning I felt nothing. That's when I realized she hadn't just taken my love, she'd taken me. The version of me that laughed, the version that dreamed, the version that believed in happy endings, all gone. In the days that followed, I moved like a man underwater. I worked out of habit, not hope. I'd fix a leaky pipe, replace a bulb, smile at guests. But every reflection, every shadow reminded me of her. Sometimes I'd hear laughter from room 3, her favorite room when we first opened. She said the morning light there made her feel like the world was new. Now it only reminded me of everything old, everything lost. And yet, in that darkness, something else began to stir. It wasn't rage. Not yet. It was resolve, a quiet, patient kind of pain that starts turning into focus. You see, when life takes everything from you, you get to decide what to do with the ruins. Some people drown in them. Others build something new from the ashes. I wasn't ready to forgive. I wasn't ready to move on, but I was ready to rise. The next morning, I woke up before dawn, made myself black coffee, no sugar, no cream. Looked at the cracked mirror in the bathroom and barely recognized the man staring back. The eyes were older, harder. The smile was gone. But behind that weariness there was something. A spark. That emptiness I'd been drowning in. It had started to turn into fuel. Fuel for something bigger than grief. Something that would make Laura remember the man she'd betrayed. She may have traded love for luxury, but I was going to make sure she learned that comfort fades, and betrayal has a cost. That day, standing in the motel parking lot under the Texas sun, I made myself a promise. I'll rebuild everything she broke, and when the time comes, she'll see me again. Not as the man she left, but as the man she'll regret losing. And that was the beginning of the revenge. Selling that old motel was one of the hardest things I've ever done. It wasn't just a building. It was a piece of my life. Every wall, every tile, every squeaky door hinge had my fingerprints on it. And hers. But after she left, the place felt haunted. Haunted by her laughter echoing down the halls. By the smell of her perfume that still lingered in the sheets. By the memory of the life I thought we were building together. So one day I locked the front door, took one last look at the neon sign flickering vacancy and whispered, "No more." Then I sold it. I walked away from the only thing I'd ever built, with just enough money to start again. But this time, I wasn't building for us, I was building for me, and for the version of me she tried to destroy. At first, it was rough. I didn't have some magic restart button or a rich man's connections. What I had was a fierce, quiet determination. I started small, flipping cheap properties around Texas, old motels, run-down inns, foreclosed houses, places everyone else had given up on. I'd fix them up myself. Paint, clean, patch, replace, rebrand. And then I'd sell. Every profit, every dime, I poured back in. There were nights I slept in my truck, blueprint folders as pillows. Days where the only thing I ate was gas station sandwiches and bad coffee. But I didn't care. Because for the first time in years, the pain had a direction. You see, heartbreak can destroy you, or it can forge you. And I was turning into something forged. I remember this one project. A broken-down roadside inn outside Austin. Roof leaking. Paint peeling. Rats in the kitchen. Everyone said it was a money pit, but I saw something else. I saw potential. I spent 6 months rebuilding it from the ground up. Every night. When the hammering stopped and the silence settled, I'd sit alone in one of the finished rooms, and I'd imagine her seeing it. I'd imagine Laura walking through that lobby, realizing I'd done what she never believed I could do. Create something beautiful without her, and somehow, that thought kept me going. Years passed, but I didn't just rebuild motels. I rebuilt myself. I started reading business books. Took online classes about hospitality, marketing, investment. When others slept, I studied. When others partied, I planned. The more I learned, the more I realized how small I used to think. I used to believe love was everything. Now I knew. Respect lasts longer. I didn't want pity anymore. I wanted power, and slowly, power came. By my 3rd year, I'd opened my first real hotel in Bennett Suites. It wasn't fancy, but it was elegant, modern, and personal, the kind of place where guests remembered the owner's handshake and smile. Within months, occupancy soared. People loved the service, the warmth, the authenticity. Word spread fast. Travelers started asking, "You staying at a Bennett?" Like it was a brand, and that's exactly what it became. Bennett Hotels and Suites. By my 5th year, I wasn't just a motel owner anymore. I was a CEO, with a team, investors, and over a dozen properties across 3 states, Texas, Oklahoma, and New Mexico. My name, the same name that once meant nothing, now stood on billboards, websites, and award lists. People who once ignored me now called me Mr. Bennett. Reporters wanted interviews. Bankers offered partnerships and business galas. Those fancy events Laura used to say I didn't belong at. Well, now they were sending me invitations. I'll never forget my first gala. It was at a grand hotel in Dallas. Chandeliers, champagne tuxedos. As I walked in, cameras flashed. People shook my hand, saying things like, "You're an inspiration, Mr. Bennett." I smiled politely. But deep down I was thinking, you don't know the half of it, because every success, every milestone, every cheer in that ballroom was built from betrayal. And maybe that's what made victory taste so sweet. It wasn't born from privilege or luck. It was born from pain. But let me tell you something strange. Even when I was on top, when my name was in magazines, when I stood on that stage accepting Entrepreneur of the Year, I still thought of her, not with love, not even with hate, but with purpose, because I always knew. Life circles back, and deep down I could feel it, that someday, somehow, fate would bring her back into my world, not as my wife, not as an equal, but as a reminder of everything I lost, and everything I became. There's a funny thing about success. It's loud enough to echo. I'd get phone calls from old friends. "Hey, Richard, heard about your hotels. You're all over the news, man." And part of me wondered if those echoes ever reached her. Did she ever hear my name again? Did she ever see my face in an article and feel that sting of regret? Did she ever wish she hadn't walked away from the man she thought was too small for her world? Because now, I was that world. 5 years after the day she left me, I stood on the balcony of my newest property, a luxury hotel overlooking the city skyline. The sun was setting, painting gold across the glass towers, and I remember whispering to myself, "You did it, old man. You built an empire from the ashes." But deep inside, I also felt something else, that quiet intuition that told me the story wasn't over. Because when you rise too high, the past finds a way to climb back into view, and mine was closer than I thought. Because just a few weeks later, life came full circle. And when it did, I saw her. Not on a magazine this time. Not in a dream. But right in front of me. Wearing a maid's uniform, at my hotel. It was a Tuesday morning that felt like any other. Gray sky, a light drizzle making the city look washed out. Everyone moving with their heads down under umbrellas. I was doing my usual rounds at the downtown property, Bennett Grand, coffee thermos in hand, checking the little things the managers always brag about. Lobby scent, elevator hum, whether the concierge desk looked tidy enough that guests thought the place ran itself. Walking the floor in your own hotel is a weird pleasure. You see the brand working the way you imagined it would, the way you told everyone it would when you had nothing but a blueprint and stubborn pride. The marble gleamed like it belonged to someone who knew how to make money and keep it. The bell staff moved like a small orchestra. The plants were healthy. The receptionist wore the smile we taught her in training. Everything was as it should be. And then I saw her. She was across the lobby, leaning over the reception counter with a rag and a disinfectant spray, scrubbing under the glass where brochures went. A janitorial uniform, navy dress, sensible shoes, a name tag clipped to the chest. I caught the name for an instant, L. Langford. The tag looked crooked the way a small life is crooked when you try to make it fit a shape it wasn't built for. Time does strange things in moments like that. I remember the exact small details as if they were frames from a film slowed down. The way the lobby light hit the cut of her cheekbone, the quiet of the fountain, the soft squeak of her shoes against the marble. Up close, she looked older, not by years so much as by erosion. The softening of features, the faint lines around the eyes, the fatigue in the hands. Those hands had once been manicured and expressive. These were calloused and careful. The perfume I once could have named was gone. Now she smelled faintly of bleach and lemon cleaner. For a beat, my mind refused to hold the vision. I thought maybe I was imagining it, an odd trick of memory and grief. But then she turned, and there it was. Those eyes I had memorized 1,000 times, those green-gray eyes that once sparkled with whatever it was that made me feel whole. We both froze. Her cloth paused in mid-wipe. The receptionist behind the counter glanced up, noticed nothing unusual. Guests carried suitcases. Life, like the city rain, continued to fall indifferent. Her face changed in that pregnant second. Recognition slammed into shame so fast it looked painful. It was the same look you see when someone gets caught doing something they thought no one could see, then realizes the person standing there is the one they robbed. Mr. Bennett? She breathed, the name a question and an apology. I felt 100 things. I also felt the necessity to be everything I had learned to be, calm, measured, a man who had built things out of ruin. So I modulated my voice. I let the smile I'd trained to use in boardrooms sit flat and even. It felt a little like putting on gloves you hadn't worn in a while. Formal, professional, slightly foreign. "Good morning," I said, slow, neutral. "Ms. Langford, welcome to work." She looked like she wanted to say everything and nothing at once. The rag slipped from her fingers, and for an instant both our eyes tracked it to the marble floor, like it was the most interesting thing in the world. Then she bent to pick it up, hands tucked back like a child's. I could feel the staff watching. The receptionist's smile gave way to that polite curiosity people show when two old friends meet in an odd place. Except it wasn't friendship between us anymore. I could see questions forming in her eyes. Who is that woman? Why does the boss know her? Laura met my gaze again, and for a second I thought I could read every shamed memory on her face. There was regret, yes, but also something smaller and uglier. Panic edged with embarrassment. She swallowed like someone who'd been rehearsing lines in the dark. "I didn't expect you here," she said. Her voice wobbled the way a violin string might before it breaks. "Nor I answered. The words were simple. So was the truth. I walked closer because proximity matters. You can often tell how a person will hold themselves by how they stand when someone they wronged approaches. She stood small, her shoulders hunched. There was no pretense left. I didn't want a scene. What I wanted, even then, wasn't to humiliate or to feed some crude satisfaction. Revenge doesn't always wear fireworks. Often it wears patience and a steady hand. The first strike was not to shout, not to betray the echo of what we once were. It was to let time, circumstance, and the weight of her choices speak. I nodded to the manager standing behind the desk. "Keep us running smoothly," I said, tone light. "Make sure she's assigned to housekeeping training today. I don't like gaps in the schedule." A flicker passed across Laura's face. Relief? Fear? Something like the old private smile she'd give when we'd accomplished something small together. Her lips trembled. "Yes, Mr. Bennett." After I left the desk, I walked the lobby in a way I hadn't in years. I made sure to pass where she could see me without forcing the encounter. I watched her from the bar stool a safe distance away as she moved quietly through her tasks. She didn't look up. She seemed intent on being invisible, like a ghost trying out invisibility in a world that remembers. In the manager's office that morning, I let myself think, not as a man consumed by rancor, but as a strategist. How did we arrive here? How did the scales of fate tip in such a way that she, who once decorated rooms and laughed about a million 2-cent plans with me in the night, now scrubbed the baseboards of a hotel that bore my name? Fate, I decided then, has a wicked sense of balance. But balance is not enough. If life is to be fair, or at least to make sense to the man inside me, then action must follow thought. I spent the next hour doing the things a man is expected to do, checking inventory, answering emails, signing a contract for a new boutique property on the outskirts. But all the while, the image of her in a uniform pinned in my mind like a photograph you can't throw away. It's funny how people picture revenge. Hollywood shows burning cars, shouting matches, cold-blooded confrontations. Real life is quieter. Real life collects small humiliations like pebbles, and over time those pebbles become a path. I didn't want to shatter her. I wanted her to understand the ruin her choices left in their wake, quietly, repeatedly, until the lesson was unavoidable. That afternoon, I called the head of operations into my office. She'd been a manager under me long enough to know my moods and moods that end in decisions. I closed the door and told her, "We have a new hire in housekeeping, Ms. Langford. She'll be on the team for now. Put her through the full training program. Pair her with Martin for a week. No shortcuts. I want her work observed, and make sure she understands our standards." The head of operations blinked. "Sir, are we?" "We're keeping the standards," I interrupted. That's all. There was a pause, a breathless respect for the line I drew and the meaning behind it. People are clever that way. They sense orders designed to be more than routine. Word moves fast in a hotel, staff whispered, eyes darting between the laundry room and the back hall. Guests noticed a new face in the corridor. Gossip did what gossip always does. It stitched together the raw edges of speculation into a blanket of certainty. Laura's first week was a study in restraint. She arrived early, left late, and gave everything she had to the work at hand. You could tell she'd been trained by a life that now demanded sweat and humility, instead of champagne and adoration. She scrubbed until her knuckles blanched and came to find me once in the kitchen with a towel over my shoulder. She kept her head down, voice barely a whisper. "Sir," she said, I don't mean any trouble. I need something to do." The ache of her words was not what I expected. For a moment, a memory flashed. The night she'd hugged me after the first profitable month, saying, "We did it." That version of her felt like a lifetime away. I kept my face politely neutral. "Do your job well," I told her. "That's all anyone can ask." She nodded and returned to the clatter of linen carts and the hum of steam presses. I watched her go and felt a curious mix of satisfaction and an odd, aching pity. Even in the planning of my revenge, I wasn't completely immune to the human wreckage of someone who'd made choices and then had to live under them. Over the following weeks, I watched the hotel floor as I had never before. I listened for the small things. A clipped apology to a guest, the quiet way she scooted past the staff room, the way her hands handled a duster like it was a relic. There were mornings she would pause at the service elevator and look at the lobby as if measuring distance in missed opportunities. Those pauses told me more than any confrontation could have. They were the soft chisel of conscience at work, slowly revealing a man I had become, not the raw, heartbroken fool who'd once sat under a ceiling fan, but a person who'd used that very pain to shape an outcome. Fate had knocked, dressed in a uniform and carrying a cart of dirty sheets, and I had opened the door. The revenge, I realized, wasn't about making her suffer in front of others. It was about letting consequence have time to teach its lesson. It was about standing where I belonged, calm and unshaken, while the truth of her choices obeyed gravity and caught up. Sometimes the quietest storms are the most devastating, and sometimes the smallest courtesies, a cool greeting at the desk, a neutral instruction in an office, are the knives that cut loudest because they're edged with dignity. That Tuesday morning, when I first said, "Welcome to work," I hadn't intended for it to mean as much as it did. But words have a way of carrying weight you don't plan for. In that single, measured greeting, the whole next chapter began to write itself. The moment I said his name, David Langford, it was like the air itself froze between us. Laura's lips parted, but no words came out. Her hands, the same hands that used to rest gently on my shoulder when we dreamed of our future, now clutched the edge of the desk like she was holding on to the last thread of her dignity. I watched her struggle to breathe, to compose herself, and for a moment, I felt something twist inside me. Not pity, not forgiveness, just the quiet satisfaction of balance returning to the universe. She finally managed to whisper, "Richard, please don't do this." I tilted my head. "Do what? Offer you a chance to prove your worth? You wanted to work here, didn't you?" She nodded weakly, eyes glistening. I didn't say another word. I simply motioned for her to leave my office. As she turned, I could see it. Her pride was gone, shattered like fine china. Over the next few days, I planned every detail. Not out of cruelty, but precision. Revenge, real revenge, doesn't scream. It whispers. It moves slowly, elegantly, until the other person doesn't even realize they've already lost everything. David Langford had made his fortune buying struggling hotels, flipping them for profit, and leaving small owners bankrupt in his wake. He'd even tried to buy mine years ago, back when I was nothing but a tired man with dreams and a broken heart. Now, the tables had turned. I had my legal team quietly prepare documents showing my intent to buy out Langford's company. He'd fallen into debt recently. Bad investments, bad timing. I could see it in the financial whispers spreading through the Texas business community. But that was only the first move. The day of his arrival came. My staff was instructed to treat him well, luxury suite, premium service, but to assign Laura as his personal floor attendant. I could see her hesitate when she read the assignment list. Her hands shook as she carried fresh linens up to his room. I watched from the security monitor, not because I wanted to spy, but because I needed to see the moment the past collided with the present. The door opened. David stepped out, older now, but still wearing that arrogant smirk that once made me feel small. And there she was, Laura, frozen in place, eyes wide, staring at the man she left everything for. He looked at her like she was invisible. Just another maid, not his wife, not his upgrade. A maid. I saw her mouth move. Maybe she said his name. Maybe she didn't, but he simply brushed past her, phone in hand, barking orders into the receiver. She stood there for a few seconds, then turned away, shoulders trembling. That was when I knew. My revenge didn't need to be loud. It was already working. A few days later, I invited Langford to dinner in my private suite. He accepted, probably thinking I wanted to partner with him. As we sat across the table, expensive whiskey between us, he leaned in with that same shark-like grin. "You've done well for yourself, Bennett. Impressive, never thought you'd make it this far." I smiled, calm and polite. "Yeah, life's full of surprises." He chuckled, sipping his drink. "Tell you what, maybe we should work together. I've got some properties I'm looking to offload." I leaned forward, eyes steady. "You mean the ones that are already under my acquisition list?" He blinked. "What?" I slid a folder across the table. Inside were the documents. Proof of purchase, legal filings, everything. His company was already mine. He stared at the papers, disbelief turning into anger. "What the hell is this?" I stood up, straightening my jacket. "It's business, David. You taught me well. Buy low, sell high, and never forget the people you step on." He slammed his hand on the table, face red. "You can't do this." "Oh, but I already have," I said softly. And I did it without breaking a single law. He glared at me, breathing hard, and for the first time I saw fear in his eyes. I leaned closer. "You remember Laura, don't you? The woman you married after she left me?" His jaw tightened. "What about her?" "She works for me now." He froze. "What?" "She's one of my maids. Cleans the rooms. Quietly, honestly. Maybe for the first time in her life." His face turned pale. "You're lying," I smiled faintly. "You'll see for yourself when you check out." And then I walked away. That night, as Laura cleaned the suite next to his, she saw him leaving the elevator, alone, disheveled, phone pressed to his ear, muttering about bankruptcy and betrayal. He didn't even notice her, didn't even look at her. The man she destroyed her life for had just lost everything. And she had no one left to blame but herself. Revenge wasn't about destroying them. It was about restoring balance, letting the universe show them what they'd become. Every morning after that, Laura showed up to work quietly. No excuses, no bitterness, just silence, and I let her stay. Not because I forgave her, but because sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't taking someone down. It's letting them live in the world they created. And I made sure that world was spotless. David Langford walked into my hotel like he owned the place. Same smug walk, same polished confidence. The kind that only money and arrogance can breed. His suit probably cost more than my first car, and that diamond-encrusted watch on his wrist glimmered like a trophy for bad decisions. But here's the funny part. I didn't feel anger anymore. I just felt ready. When he spotted me near the lobby bar, his smirk widened. Richard Bennett, the motel guy?" He laughed, clapping me on the shoulder like we were old friends. "Man, look at you. From fixing leaky pipes to running a 5-star hotel. Didn't think you had it in you," I smiled, slow and deliberate. "Yeah, life's full of surprises. Some people clean floors, others build empires." He didn't catch the hint. He never did. The meeting that day was in my top-floor conference suite. All glass, steel, and city skyline. A dozen investors sat around the polished mahogany table, and guess who was serving the coffee? Laura. She moved quietly, head bowed, a shadow of the woman she once was. Her uniform crisp, her hair pulled back tight, but her hands shook every time she poured a cup. David didn't even look at her. Not once. And I watched the whole thing unfold, like a scene in slow motion. The man who'd stolen her, the woman who'd left me, both trapped in a moment they couldn't escape. I introduced the meeting with calm confidence. We talked numbers, acquisitions, future projections. I led the conversation the way a conductor leads an orchestra, every word measured, every silence intentional. David, of course, tried to dominate the room. He bragged about his properties, his portfolio diversification, his elite clientele. But I could see the cracks beneath his voice, the twitch in his jaw, the way he avoided eye contact when someone mentioned debt ratios. Because I already knew, his company, Langford Holdings, was on the brink of collapse. His empire was hollow, and I had come prepared to claim every last piece of it. When the meeting ended, I caught him before he left. "David, why don't we have a private chat?" "Old time's sake," he grinned. That same lazy grin that once made me feel like a nobody. "Sure thing, Richard. Lead the way." We walked into my office, the same office where Laura once stood trembling in that maid's uniform. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. He sat down, adjusting his cufflinks. "So what's this about? You looking to partner up? Expand?" I leaned back in my chair. "Something like that. I'm looking to buy you out." His eyes narrowed. "Buy me out?" "Yeah," I said calmly, sliding a folder across the table. "Langford Holdings. Your debt's public record, David. I know about the failed Houston project, the San Antonio foreclosure, the investors pulling out. You're drowning." He stared at the papers, his face turned from confident to confused to furious. "You think you can just waltz in here and take everything I built?" I smiled, the same way he did when he took everything from me. "I don't think, David. I already did." Inside that folder were the signed documents. His board members had already agreed to sell their shares. His company was mine. He grabbed the folder, flipping through the pages with shaking hands. You son of a careful," I said, my tone quiet but razor sharp. "Language. You're in my office now." He pushed back from the desk, breathing hard. "This isn't over." "Oh, it's been over," I said. "You just didn't realize it yet." He stormed out, slamming the door behind him. I found Laura in the staff hallway later that day. She'd already heard, everyone had. The headlines were all over the news. Bennett Hotels acquires Langford Holdings in surprise takeover. She was holding an envelope, her resignation letter. Her eyes were red, not from anger, but something deeper. Shame. Regret. "I came to say goodbye," she murmured. "I can't stay here anymore." I nodded slowly. "I figured." She handed me the letter, her hand trembling. "I don't expect you to forgive me, I need to start over." I reached into my drawer and pulled out a check on her final paycheck. She hesitated before taking it. Then, in a voice so small I could barely hear her, she asked, "Why didn't you just fire me, Richard? You had every reason to." I looked her straight in the eye. No anger, no satisfaction, just truth. "Because firing you would have been easy," I said. "But I wanted you to see what you threw away. Not the money. Not the comfort. Me. The man who would have stood by you even when the world turned its back." She blinked, tears spilling over. "I made a mistake." "Yeah," I said quietly. "We both did. You chose him. And I chose to believe in you." She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. She just stood there silent, clutching the check like it was a weight she'd never be able to drop. As she turned to leave, I called out, "Laura." She stopped. "For what it's worth, I hope you find peace. Just don't expect it to come easy." She nodded slowly, then walked away, down the long hallway, her footsteps fading until there was nothing left but silence. That moment, watching her disappear again, should have hurt. But it didn't. It felt finished, like closing a chapter that had haunted me for too long. And as I looked out my office window at the city skyline, my city now, I realized something. Revenge isn't about destroying someone. It's about reclaiming the parts of yourself they tried to take. And that day, I got everything back, and my pride, my peace, and the quiet power of knowing I'd turned my pain into purpose. A month after it all ended, after the headlines, the whispers, the silent departures, I found myself behind the wheel of my old truck, driving down a quiet Texas highway. The kind of road that holds your memories whether you like it or not. The sun was setting low, turning the sky into a mix of orange and fading blue, and before I knew it, I was back where it all began. The old motel, my first dream, my first failure, my first love. The sign was still there, Bennett's Roadside Inn, but half the letters had fallen off. The paint peeled like dried skin, and the parking lot was cracked, weeds pushing through the asphalt. The once bright neon vacancy flickered weakly, like it was trying to remember a time when people cared. I parked out front and got out, The air smelled of dust and nostalgia. As I pushed open the lobby door, it groaned like an old friend waking up from a long sleep. The place was empty. No front desk bell, no coffee pot brewing, no faint buzz of the ceiling fan. Just silence. And in that silence, I could almost hear echoes of my younger self. The laughter. The late nights. The hope. I walked down the narrow hallways, the faded carpet crunching under my boots. Every door I passed had a memory attached. Room 3, where Laura once surprised me with a candlelit dinner after our first profitable month. Room 7, where I fixed the leaky faucet myself because we couldn't afford a plumber. Room 12, where I once dreamed about building a chain of hotels that bore my name. Back then, I was just a man with big dreams and a bigger heart. Naive, maybe, but pure. And standing there in those decaying halls, I finally understood something. That man was gone, but he wasn't dead. He had just evolved. I wasn't bitter anymore. I wasn't angry, just grateful. Grateful for the lessons, for the pain, for the betrayal that shaped me into someone stronger than I ever thought I could be. People think revenge is about destruction, about burning the other person's world to ashes. But it's not. It's about balance. Laura lost her wealth, her comfort, her pride. I lost my love, my innocence, my peace. Maybe that's balance. Maybe that's fair. But as I stood there looking around that dusty old lobby, I realized something even deeper. I didn't need her to suffer anymore, because I'd already won. Not just in business. Not in money or power, but in peace. That's the real victory, when you can look back at your scars and smile. I locked the door behind me, took one last look at the rusted sign and whispered, "Thank you." Then I got back in my truck, turned the key and drove away. Not from the past, but toward my future. And for the first time in years, I felt free. Life has a strange way of teaching you lessons you never asked for. Laura taught me one of the hardest, that not everyone you build your world around will want to stay in it. Some people will trade love for luxury, loyalty for status, and honesty for the illusion of comfort. But here's the truth I learned the hard way. When someone betrays you, they don't destroy you, they reveal you, they show you what you're made of. They force you to grow stronger than you ever intended. And the best way to get even isn't by hurting them back, it's by rising so high they have to look up to see you. So, to anyone out there listening, the ones who've been left, cheated, lied to, or broken, don't waste your energy plotting revenge. Don't drown in anger. Don't chase the past, build your empire. Build your peace, because one day, the people who walked away will have to walk past what you've built, and they'll realize they never broke you. They just built the fire that made you unstoppable. So when that day comes, don't gloat. Don't rub it in. Just smile, because you don't owe them pain. You owe yourself peace. And peace, that's the kind of revenge no one can take away.